Demonstration? Here too. My name is Peter. My partner's name is Chris. She'll be down here in just a couple minutes to help out with this. We're going to make a flask for this demonstration. A flask is like a canteen you carry around with you. This one's not a hip flask. It's going to have two loops at the top end. It'll be a flat floor, couple loops with a strap. The strap, of course, comes later. That's not flask. Got my blowpipe ready. Got a bunch of color laid out around the shop. We have a color furnace, clear furnace, glory hole, which is a reheating chamber, pipe warmer, color warmer as well. We warm color in there, and an annealing oven. Those are the hot pieces of equipment in the shop. I'm going to start this one off with just a tiny little gather of blue glass. Just enough to just cover the tip of the pipe. This is blue that's mostly copper carbonate, making this blue with a pinch of cobalt. Copper makes a turquoise blue. It should be kind of a sharp blue, and the cobalt mellows it out a little bit. But just the tiniest little bit of air in there, a little air in the pipe, tapped in with my thumb, and I just went until I saw the end just bulge, just a little bit. There's no valve in the pipe, the air is free to come and go. So you won't see this blue from the outside of the piece, but it will be there as a background behind the other colors that are going to be applied. And you'll see it right at the rim. You'll see a little bit of blue right at the mouth of the glass. Next, I'm going to get a gather of clear, and then I'm going to add white glass on top of that. The stuff that I'm rolling through is called frit, F-R-I-T. It was once in a furnace. It was taken out in a ladle, dumped in water, allowed to craze apart into different particle sizes. That's the way it would have been done historically. They would have ladled it out, or they would have gathered it and let it drizzle off the end of a rod into water. The way it's done now would be to have a furnace next to it, cold in it, so the glass comes running out of the furnace into the liquid, or it can go to a crusher. You have to be real careful if you crush it or smash it somehow, because it is easy at that point to end up with little bits of metal in it. The metal, generally being iron-based, will then make little flecks of green, because iron produces green. Just added some, it's called tannin grit. It's a dark pine green color. And I'm smoothing that all back out. Put a little more air in, and then take one more gather of clear glass. I'm going to add more color on the outside of that. So this is all sort of the base coloration here. The flask we're making, we call a leaf flask. It was inspired by our friend Leaf, who spells his name like Leif Erikson, not Leaf, the leaf on a tree. But the flask itself is being made to have a little bit of a leaf-like image to it. So we're going to add a few different greens. After I let this cool, I'll get the next layer. It's still moving, which is why I'm rolling it. the glass moves really quickly when it comes out of the furnace. Let me show you that for just a second. I'm just going to hang this up. It's dropping toward the ground. So it's dropping evenly, and I can let it do that because it's moving really slowly right now. And this could have gotten a clear glass and not turn, okay? Not turning. So you can see the drizzle that it makes. The drizzle is like a drizzle of honey. And it's moving just a little slower than honey when it comes out of the furnace. The thinner it is, the faster it cools. The thicker it is, the longer it stays hot. And this glass, unlike glass that's made in machines, this glass is made for hand blowing specifically. So it's formulated to be what's called a long glass. A long glass is one that you can manipulate for a more extended period of time, which is what the hand blowers like us want. Glass for machines is called a short glass. And it's made to be very, very runny and then stiffen very suddenly. So it can cut into a plug, slide down into a mold, be inflated, and in that moment of inflation, arrest in its motion and become the object that was the intent. So I added another transparent green, and now I'm adding an opaque green, a very intense bright green. When we work with green, we often add multiple different greens. If you look back at the leaves in the trees behind the shop, you see all sorts of colors. You see yellow green, you see dark blue green, gray green, all kinds of different color there. So we're trying to make something that relates to that kind of natural imagery. You don't do it with just one crayon. Right, that's plenty of color. We're going to add a band of blue to this. As soon as I get this outside of this smoothed off, you come over to that metal table. There are two sets of rollers on the table, and they are cocked at an angle. I'm going to be setting the pipe on them. We're going to run a line. This one's fairly cool, so it puts up kind of quick. We cool this spot. Yeah, this. We extend some more. All right. So Chris is going to get together a blue glass. Chris was looking at this and going, "That's huge." I said, "Yeah, it is big. It is big. That's okay. I get carried away sometimes in demonstration." You are giving something up when you do this, when you talk while you work. You have to either be paying attention to the glass or paying attention to what you're saying. So we try to balance that out. So as I was saying, the wheels are cocked at an angle. We set the angle so that they act like a screw thread and drive the glass in one direction. So Chris brought the blue glass to the furnace, he moved it up and touched the body of the piece, pulled it back so there was a connection, and then as I was rolling, we created a spiral line running down the body of the piece. Which is all well and good, but that doesn't give you the leaf-like effect, because that is this part, which is using the tool that has a hook in it. I'm dragging down the surface. And that's going to give you the little veins of color running down the flask, like the veins that you have in a leaf. One on each side. All right, when the demonstration is over, don't ask me if you can have things that we cut up onto the floor of the shop. The reason to not ask me is because those pieces are either sharp, they're broken, they're hot, or they're not slow cooled properly. Not being slow cooled means they actually explode. If you cool a piece inappropriately, it'll have all sorts of tension in it. And that tension is going to cause it to explode fairly violently. The pieces that we make, in order to avoid that, in order to avoid them cracking or breaking, when we finish them, they have to be slow cooled. So I started moving the surface back toward smoothness, and I'm slowly adding air to this. Right now, it's going to hold probably about 8 ounces of liquid, maybe 10. So using my jacks to indent the glass just off the tip of the blowpipe. And now I'm pulling against the body to stretch out the neck. Like a bottleneck. And of course you can't see the colors in their finished form while the glass is hot. While we're working, the glass coming out of the furnace is coming out of there at around 2,200 degrees. And while we're working, the coolest that we're going to let it get is about 1,000 degrees less than that, around 1,200. Chrissy, can you blow this time? Just a little bit. There. We usually flatten flasks on the martyr, which is the metal table over there. But this one, it's hard for me to see where the lines are that we created. So it's easier to start it at the bench because I want the pull lines from the hooking tool to be on the two sides of the flask. Now that I've got it started, we can meet at the martyr and do the rest of the flattening. When we do this, I cap the end of the pipe. So if the pipe isn't capped, the form will completely collapse in the center. And then instead of a flask, you have a pinch bottle. Let's put a little button on attached to that. We're going to put a little button of glass on the bottom, a little button of clear glass. This will be brown rod for later, but it's helping sure we get through the process. Now, you might notice now that we're starting to see that line that's on the outside. That's because the green is starting to show up. light. So we can open the mouth. There's a little shaft of light in here somewhere. You can see that a little better with the light hitting it. That exterior green is a really bright, intense green. You can see it in the 2 bottles that are over there on that shelf, or in the rods that are down here. It's the brightest, most intense of the greens that's over there. So Chris is going to come from this end with the rod that he has. We're going to attach to the little bit that we added to the bottom of the flask that will be drawn off later. But all of this collectively let us make a hotter, stronger attachment than we would have been making with just the punty. This is the punty that Chris has, P-U-N-T-Y. That comes from the Italian word puntil, or puntil, P-O-N-T-I-L. We're going to break the flask loose onto that rod. We're just letting it set up just a little bit more. It doesn't want to go out of control when it breaks loose. Onto the punty rod, you can see just a little hint of blue there in the inside of the rim. The neck is really tight. It's only got about a ½ inch opening in it right now. And that makes it almost impossible to actually drink out of if that's what you want to do with it. A lot of people end up using these as wall vases. Or the transparent ones, sometimes they'll hang in a window. But we're always making them with the idea that they may be used as a drinking vessel. Still need to go a little wider than that. At first heat, when you're reheating, you've got a small opening. You have to be really careful because when you reheat, the glass starts to bead up. It starts to draw back on itself and thicken. And it's easy to close that opening off. So that first little heat was just get enough heat in there to open it a little bit. And then get a second heat, the one that I just got, and be able to make it a much wider open neck. If I can give them a little detail at the top, it's like where the cap would attach to a bottle, or where the bail would attach to a bottle fume. Not that you're going to put a cap or a bail on this, you don't need that. If you like to look at old bottles, if you see a bottle in a thrift store or an antique shop that has the little rim where the cap attaches to it, look at the neck, and if there's a seam line underneath that cap area, then the bottle is blown in a mold. We still don't know whether it's blown by hand in a mold or blown by machine. The way you know that is when you look at that line, that seam line that's underneath the cap area. If the seam line twists, that means that it was formed by hand. If the seam line is straight up and down, it came straight out of a machine mold. There was a time, not so very long ago, when every beer bottle made was made by hand. And believe me, it was a lot of beer bottles. Back in those days, of course, they made the bottles thicker so they could be washed and reused instead of the way we make them now. The old thicker bottles were actually smarter. These are called pullaways or tearaways. They're decorative bits that we add, but they also make the loops and the body where the loop attaches much stronger. So the reason the thick bottles were smarter is because they could be cleaned and be reused. The way we do it now is we make thin bottles, which are cheaper to produce in the first place. But then to reuse them, they have to be smashed up and added back 50-50 with raw materials and heated back up to 2,400 degrees. Be made back into the same bottle as they were in the first place. Kind of a silly method. Using glass, which is an incredibly durable material. Got our two little bits on there. Everything went really nicely on this one. It could still fall off the back. But hopefully we're done at this point. Again, if I can get a little light, you can sort of see the feathering there. This one is done. We have to get it off of the rod. I mentioned earlier that we were only working down to around 1,200 degrees. The body of the piece is still over that temperature, and I know that because it hasn't broken. I just put a little water on the glass that's on the rod to cause some little frizzling and weaken that area, knock it loose, and the rest of it in this box, this is called an annealing oven. Everything we make goes in there. You want to time it so that it's stiff and rigid enough that it doesn't change shape right away. It's moving just a little bit right now, but it's moving so slowly that you're not going to notice any change in it because the outside is rigid enough at 1,200 to slow it way down. But it's dropping quickly to 960, which is the temperature in the oven. You leave it at 960 all day long. You bring it down in little increments. It's an all-night process for a piece of that thickness. We get to see that tomorrow morning. If you want to see it, be back tomorrow morning. If you don't want to wait that long, that's us back there. Take a look at that work. We did all of it. If you don't want to do that, stay and ask questions. If you don't want to do that, go away. Thanks for coming, everybody.